A wealthy family forces their son's black fiancée to sign a prenuptial agreement, believing she's a gold digger. They have no idea her father, a seemingly humble office worker, is a secret billionaire who has been preparing her for this moment her entire life. This is the story of how a woman uses dignity, intelligence, and a devastating secret to turn the tables on a family of powerful elitists. The pen trembled in her hands as Eliza watched her every move with a cold smile of satisfaction. "Sign on the dotted line, dear. It's just a formality to protect the family fortune," said her mother-in-law in that condescending tone that Jasmine had learned to hate over the past 6 months. The prenuptial agreement lay there, spread out on the mahogany desk in the Hayes family office. 15 pages of legal humiliation that basically said, "You are worthless and always will be." Jasmine Davis, 27, a math teacher at a public school, never imagined that the love of her life would put her through this. Leo, her fiancé, sat next to his mother, avoiding looking directly at her. The man who had promised to fight the world alongside her now seemed more interested in studying his own Italian shoes. "Jasmine, you understand that this is necessary, don't you?" Eliza continued, her voice dripping with false kindness. "Leo has worked hard to build his career in the family business. And considering your financial situation, well, we need to make sure his intentions are genuine." The financial situation was elegant code for "you're black, poor, and obviously after our money." The clauses were brutal: no rights to property acquired before or during the marriage, alimony limited to 2 years in the event of divorce, and a special clause that would leave her with nothing if she brought shame or embarrassment to the family, as if her very existence wasn't considered embarrassing enough. "Do you have any questions about the terms?" asked the family lawyer, a 60-year-old man who looked at her as if she were a particularly unpleasant insect. Jasmine took a deep breath. For months, she had swallowed comments about her exotic hair, forced smiles when Eliza introduced her as Leo's teacher girlfriend, and pitying looks from the family's wealthy friends who clearly thought she didn't belong there. "Actually, I have a question," Jasmine said calmly, surprising everyone in the room. "Does this agreement include any assets I might inherit from my family?" Eliza laughed, a high-pitched, unpleasant sound. "Oh dear, what assets? Isn't your father just an office worker?" The silence that followed was charged with tension. Jasmine looked at Leo, who finally raised his eyes, looking uncomfortable with his mother's explicit cruelty. For a moment, she almost told the truth. She almost revealed the secret that her father Marcus had kept all his life. She almost explained why a man who could buy and sell the Hayes family 10 times over chose to live in a modest house and drive a used car. But she didn't. Instead, she signed the agreement with a calmness that left Eliza slightly uneasy. "There," said Jasmine, handing back the pen. "I hope this brings you the peace of mind you were looking for." As she left the office, Jasmine held her head high and a serene smile on her lips. What the Hayes family didn't know was that every word of contempt, every condescending glance, every moment of humiliation was being carefully filed away in her memory. 3 months later, when the phone rang in the middle of the night with the news of her father's sudden death, Jasmine couldn't imagine that her life was about to change in a way that would make the prenuptial agreement seem like a bad joke. The humiliations began subtly, as they always do in families that have mastered the art of elegant prejudice for generations. The week after the agreement was signed, Eliza organized a dinner to officially introduce her future daughter-in-law to high society. The invitation arrived by email with a seemingly innocent note: dress code, elegant cocktail attire. "I'm sure you'll be able to find something appropriate, dear." The implicit message was crystal clear: you don't belong here, but we'll let you try to fit in anyway. Jasmine arrived at the 5-star restaurant wearing her only decent black dress, the same one she had bought for her college graduation 3 years earlier. Meanwhile, Eliza's friends paraded around in outfits that cost more than a teacher's annual salary. "What a charming dress," commented Catherine, wife of a federal judge, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's vintage, isn't it? I love this trend of reusing old pieces." Leo, sitting next to his mother, smiled nervously and muttered something about Jasmine having good taste in classic pieces. He didn't have the courage to say that she simply couldn't afford another dress. During dinner, the questions were surgical. Eliza had orchestrated each one like an interrogation disguised as small talk. "Jasmine teaches at a public school, doesn't she?" asked Victoria, the headmistress of an elite private school. "How admirable. It must be challenging working with those kinds of students." "Those kinds of students?" Jasmine repeated calmly, cutting her meat with pinpoint precision. "Well, you know," Victoria continued, taking a generous sip of wine. "Children from broken homes, without resources, without proper guidance at home." Jasmine chewed slowly, swallowed, and then smiled. "Actually, my students surprise me every day. Yesterday, an 8-year-old girl explained to me how her mother, a cleaning lady, works 3 jobs to support 4 children on her own. We talked about determination, perseverance, and dignity. They were fascinating concepts to discuss." The silence at the table was heavy. Eliza cleared her throat and quickly changed the subject, but the systematic humiliations were just beginning. The following week, Leo took her to see the family business. Hayes and Associates occupied 2 entire floors of a corporate building in the financial center, with panoramic views of the city and furniture that looked like it had come out of an architecture magazine. "This will be your office one day," said Paul, Leo's father, showing her a spacious room. "When you take over as president." Leo smiled proudly. But Jasmine noticed something interesting. Paul didn't even include her in the conversation. He talked about his son's future as if she were invisible, a temporary presence that would eventually be replaced by someone more suitable. During the visit, Eliza made a point of introducing her to each employee in the same way. "This is Jasmine, Leo's girlfriend. She's a teacher." The tone was the same as if she were saying, "She has a contagious disease, but we're being polite." The last straw came 2 weeks later during a family charity event. Jasmine was talking to other wives when she heard Eliza talking on the phone in the hallway, unaware that she was nearby. "Don't worry, dear. It's just a phase," Eliza said, clearly talking about Leo and Jasmine. "You know how young men are. They need to experiment before settling down with someone of their own level. She's exotic, but temporary." The word exotic caught like a knife. Jasmine stood still, listening to every word. Leo is already beginning to notice the incompatibilities. The class difference is very obvious, and honestly, we need to protect the family fortune. Did you see the agreement she signed? She didn't even hesitate. It only confirms our suspicions about her true intentions. That night, Jasmine confronted Leo about what she had heard. His reaction was revealing. "She didn't mean it," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "My mother sometimes speaks without thinking." "Your mother called me exotic and temporary, Leo. And you're defending her." "I'm not defending anyone. It's just that, well, you have to understand her perspective. She comes from a different generation. She only wants the best for me, and I'm not the best for you." Leo was silent for too long. When he finally spoke, his words confirmed all of Jasmine's fears. "You're wonderful, but our situation is complicated. Maybe we can work on it gradually. Show my family that I deserve to be treated like a human being." It's not that simple, Jasmine. But it was exactly that simple. And at that moment, Jasmine understood that she was fighting a war in which she was the only combatant on her side. That same night, alone in her small apartment, she called her father. Marcus answered on the first ring as he always did when she needed him. "Dad, have you ever been through something like this? Have you ever felt completely out of place in a place where you should belong?" Marcus was silent for a moment. "Daughter, I've been through things that would make those people reconsider everything they think about class and power. But I've learned that dignity doesn't depend on the approval of others. It depends on you knowing who you are, regardless of what they think about you." "Sometimes I feel like I'm fighting a battle I can't win," Jasmine said. Marcus's voice became strangely serious. "There are things about our family, about me, that I've never told you. Things that changed my perspective on what really matters in life. When you're ready, we'll talk about it." She didn't know that conversation would never happen. 3 weeks later, Marcus would suffer the heart attack that would change everything. But at that moment, as she hung up the phone, Jasmine made a silent decision. Every humiliation, every condescending comment, every look of contempt was being carefully catalogued in her memory. The Hayes family thought they had tamed a lioness. What they didn't know was that they were only feeding her fury, one cruel word at a time. The call came at 2 o'clock in the morning on a rainy Tuesday. Jasmine woke up with a start to the insistent ringing of the phone, and the tense voice of the hospital doctor confirmed her worst nightmare. Marcus had suffered a massive heart attack during the night shift. He didn't suffer, were the doctor's words, but they did not ease the pain that settled in Jasmine's chest like a lead weight. Leo accompanied her to the hospital, held her hand during the bureaucratic procedures, and whispered words of comfort that sounded empty against the echo of the cold corridors. For a few hours, Jasmine almost forgot the recent humiliations and remembered why she had fallen in love with him. The funeral was simple, just as Marcus had always wanted. A few coworkers showed up, neighbors brought modest flowers, and Jasmine cried silently as the coffin was lowered. Eliza and Paul attended, but they were clearly uncomfortable with the simplicity of the funeral in a humble neighborhood chapel. "How sad," Eliza whispered to Paul loud enough for Jasmine to hear. "Poor people never get to give their loved ones a dignified send-off." It was then that Jasmine realized even in their grief, they couldn't stop judging. A week later, while sorting through her father's few belongings, Jasmine found a sealed envelope with her name on it written in Marcus's careful handwriting. "My dear daughter," the letter read. "If you are reading this, it means that the time has come for you to learn the whole truth about our family. Go to the Central Bank downtown branch and ask for Dr. Robert Thompson. He has specific instructions on how to proceed. And Jasmine, be prepared to discover that everything you thought you knew about our situation was completely wrong." 2 days later, Jasmine was sitting in the elegant office of Robert Thompson, a 60-year-old lawyer with gray hair and suits that cost more than her monthly salary. "Miss Davis," he said, studying documents in a thick folder. "Your father was very clear about when and how to reveal this information. He wanted to make sure you were prepared for what you were about to discover." Robert slid a series of documents across the desk: stock certificates, bank statements, investment reports, all in the name of Marcus Davis. "Your father," Robert continued calmly, "was the founder and CEO of Tech Solutions, a software company that revolutionized digital security systems in the 90s. When he sold the company in 2002, the transaction was worth $4.2 billion. Jasmine blinked slowly, trying to process the words. "That's impossible. My father worked in an accounting office." "Technically, yes. He managed his fortune's investments through a discrete holding company. After selling Tech Solutions, your father made a very conscious decision to live modestly in order to give you an upbringing based on values, not privileges." Robert opened another folder. "Your current inheritance after taxes and planned donations your father made to educational institutions totals $2.8 billion. The silence in the office was deafening. "I need a moment," Jasmine murmured, and Robert nodded understandingly as she absorbed the information. A single image came to her mind: Eliza signing the prenuptial agreement with that satisfied smile, explaining how important it was to protect the family fortune from the poor teacher who was obviously after the Hayes money. "Dr. Thompson," she said finally, "how long would it take to liquidate some investments without affecting the main portfolio?" "It depends on the amount. For smaller amounts, a few days." "Why do you ask?" Jasmine smiled for the first time since her father's death. "Because I need to buy some things." Over the next few days, Jasmine began executing a plan that Marcus had inadvertently planted in her mind. First, she hired a private investigator to map out all of the Hayes family's businesses. She discovered that their company, impressive as it seemed, was worth approximately $50 million, a respectable sum but ridiculously small compared to her new reality. Second, she began asking discreet questions about the properties Hayes and Associates managed. She discovered that several smaller companies owed the firm significant favors and that Paul had made some questionable investments recently. Third, and most importantly, she kept her discovery a secret. Leo noticed that she was calmer, more confident, but he attributed that to the grieving process. "You're handling all this very well," he said during dinner. "I'm proud of how you're coping with the loss of your father." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, cutting her meat with precision. "My father taught me that the greatest lessons come in the most difficult moments." She didn't lie. She just left out a few details. A week later, Eliza called with a special surprise. "Jasmine, honey, I've organized a charity dinner for Saturday. It's for a charity that helps needy families. I thought it would be perfect for you, a cause that surely touches your heart considering your background." Condescension dripped from every word. Eliza was literally inviting Jasmine to an event about poverty because she assumed she would identify with needy people. "It'll be wonderful," Jasmine replied sweetly. "I can't wait." On the Friday before the event, Robert called. "I got the reports you asked for. The Hayes Company is facing some cash flow problems. Nothing catastrophic yet, but Paul has made some risky investments in real estate that aren't paying off as expected. They'll probably need additional capital in the next 6 months." "Perfect," Jasmine said, a new determination shining in her eyes. That evening, she tried on the dress she had bought for the charity dinner. An elegant piece from an understated boutique that cost more than her old annual salary. It wasn't flashy, but anyone with an eye for fashion would recognize the quality and the price tag. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Jasmine thought about the prenuptial agreement tucked away in her drawer. Every humiliating clause, every word that reduced her to a potential gold digger, every line that made her seem greedy for simply existing. Eliza had drafted that document to protect the family from a threat she herself had created in her prejudiced mind. What she didn't know was that she had just given Jasmine the perfect motivation for a lesson that would stay with her forever. For a moment, Jasmine felt a twinge of something that could have been pity for the Hayes family. They had no idea what was about to happen. Then she remembered all the times they had made her feel small, inadequate, too grateful just to be included in their elitist world. The pity evaporated like morning mist. Saturday was going to be interesting. Very interesting. The charity dinner was in full swing when Jasmine decided the time had come. Eliza had planned everything meticulously. She would be presented as an example of overcoming poverty through education, an inspiring story to entertain the wealthy guests as they felt virtuous for donating crumbs to the less fortunate. And now, Eliza announced into the microphone, "I would like to introduce someone very special. Jasmine Davis, our future daughter-in-law, is a teacher at a public school and knows firsthand the difficulties we are here to help alleviate." Polite applause echoed through the hall as Jasmine rose gracefully. She wore an elegant, understated dress that did not draw attention to its exorbitant price tag. "Thank you, Eliza," Jasmine said, her calm voice filling the silence. "It's true that I know financial hardship well. My father always taught me that a person's true value isn't in his bank account." Eliza smiled smugly, thinking she was getting confirmation that Jasmine was indeed poor and grateful for the opportunity to be there. But Jasmine continued, "He also taught me that sometimes we have to choose when to reveal our true nature." Something in her tone made Leo frown. Eliza continued smiling, but a small wrinkle of confusion appeared on her forehead. "I'm going to make a donation to the institution we're supporting today," Jasmine said calmly. "Dr. Thompson, would you come over here, please?" Robert Thompson, elegant in his impeccable suit, emerged from among the guests carrying a leather briefcase. "Who is that man?" Paul whispered to Eliza, who shook her head, not understanding. "This is Dr. Robert Thompson from Thompson & Associates," Jasmine announced. "He is the lawyer responsible for administering my father's estate, Marcus Davis." The name meant nothing to Eliza, but some guests in the hall began to whisper among themselves. Older businessmen recognized that surname from somewhere. "Marcus Davis," repeated a man in the audience. Isn't that Davis from Tech Solutions?" The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Robert opened his briefcase and took out a check. "On behalf of the Davis family, I would like to make a donation of $500,000 to this very important cause." The room exploded in murmurs. $500,000 was more than most of those present would donate in a decade. Eliza was speechless. Jasmine, dear, this is impossible. You don't have. I don't have what? Jasmine asked softly. Money, class, enough value for your family? Leo stood up abruptly. Jasmine, what is going on here? What is going on, she replied, her voice cutting through the air like a knife, is that you have spent months treating me like a gold digger because of the color of my skin and my humble origins. You made a point of humiliating me, of making me sign a prenuptial agreement that basically called me a prostitute in disguise. The room was now completely silent. Eliza looked as if she had seen a ghost. My father was Marcus Davis, founder of Tech Solutions. When he sold the company in 2002, it was worth $4.2 billion. Jasmine paused, letting the number echo. My current inheritance is $2.8 billion. Paul fell heavily into his chair. Eliza began to shake her head in denial. That means, Jasmine continued with a serene smile, that I could buy your company, Leo, 23 times and still have money left over for tips. Leo was as pale as a sheet. Why? Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing. And you showed me exactly that. Jasmine turned to Eliza, who looked as if she were about to faint. About that prenuptial agreement you made me sign, she said, taking an envelope out of her purse. I brought it here today. With deliberate movements, she tore the document into small pieces and let the fragments fall to the floor. I don't need it anymore. Not because it's worthless legally, but because I finally understand that I would never marry someone from a family that sees me as a threat instead of a person. Leo tried to approach her. Jasmine, we can talk about this. We can work it out. Work it out? She laughed, a clear sound that echoed through the silent hall. Leo, you watched me sign an agreement that would leave me with nothing if I disgraced your family. You watched your mother call me exotic and temporary. You never defended me because deep down, you believed they were right. Robert approached and whispered something in Jasmine's ear. She nodded. Oh, and just for the record, she said, turning back to Paul, Dr. Thompson informed me that your company is facing some financial difficulties, cash flow problems, investments that didn't yield as expected. Paul swallowed hard. I could help, of course. $15 million would solve all your problems. She paused dramatically. But I think I'll invest that money in educational programs for underprivileged children. After all, Eliza always emphasized how I should identify with, how did she put it? People in my situation. Eliza finally found her voice, but it came out as a squeak. Jasmine, please. You have to understand that we didn't know. If we had known who you really were. If you had known who I was. Jasmine repeated slowly. You knew exactly who I was, a black woman, intelligent, hardworking, and dignified. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? You only respect bank accounts. The silence in the hall was deafening. Some guests began to whisper among themselves, clearly embarrassed by what they had witnessed. The Hayes family, Jasmine said, her voice echoing with an authority they had never heard from her before, you gave me the greatest gift of my life. You showed me that people who only value money are never worthy of my time or my love. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. Oh, and Eliza, that smug smile you had when I signed the agreement? Cherish that memory because it was the last moment you ever felt superior to me. As Jasmine walked toward the exit with Robert at her side, the hall remained in complete silence. Eliza sat with tears streaming down her face, finally understanding that she had lost not only a daughter-in-law but any chance at redemption. Leo ran after her into the parking lot, but Jasmine was already getting into a limousine he hadn't noticed before. Jasmine, wait. This is crazy. We love each other. She looked at him through the open window. Leo, you love the idea of saving me. You never really loved me. If you had, you would have torn up that agreement before I could sign it. The limousine drove away, leaving Leo alone in the parking lot, finally understanding that he had lost the most extraordinary woman he had ever known because of pure cowardice and prejudice. Inside the hall, Eliza looked at the pieces of the prenuptial agreement scattered on the floor, realizing that each fragment represented a lost opportunity, a burned bridge, a lesson that had come too late. Jasmine's revenge had not been loud or dramatic. It had been elegant, devastating, and absolutely perfect. She had not destroyed the Hayes family with anger. She had let them destroy themselves with their own small-mindedness. At the back of the hall, some guests were already whispering about how the poor teacher had turned out to be one of the richest women in the country and how the prestigious Hayes family had made the stupidest mistake of their lives by underestimating someone based on racial and social prejudice. The story would spread through the social circles of the elite in a matter of hours. Eliza and Paul would never be able to look at their peers again without wondering if they were whispering about their ignorance and arrogance. But what they didn't know yet was that public humiliation would only be the beginning of the consequences of underestimating Jasmine Davis. 2 years later, Jasmine was in her office on the 40th floor of a building she had bought herself, overseeing the inauguration of the 5th Davis Foundation School across the country. Her education investment company had become a national benchmark, and she regularly appeared on magazine covers as one of the most influential women in the country. The same prenuptial agreement that was supposed to humiliate her now hung framed on her wall, not as a trophy of revenge but as a reminder to never again allow anyone to question her worth. "Mrs. Davis," said her assistant as she entered the room. "The Hayes family is in the reception area. They say it's about a business opportunity." Jasmine smiled. Over the past 2 years, she had watched from afar as the Hayes empire gradually crumbled. The company faced lawsuit after lawsuit for mismanagement. Paul had declared personal bankruptcy, and Eliza had been expelled from every social club after details of her arrogance spread through elite circles. Leo had tried to contact her countless times, but Jasmine never responded. She had heard through the grapevine that he was now working as a freelance consultant, a dramatic fall for someone who considered himself the heir to an empire. "Tell them I don't have any meetings available for the next 5 years, Jasmine replied calmly. Through the window, she watched Eliza and Paul leave the building, clearly defeated. Eliza, who had once called her exotic and temporary, now walked hunched over, weighed down by the burden of her own choices. That night, at home with Michael, her social worker husband who loved her even before he knew she had a bank account, Jasmine reflected on the most valuable lesson her father had taught her. "You know what's ironic," she said, serving the dinner she had prepared herself. "They tried to make me feel small because they thought I didn't have any money, but they found out that money was never what made me great." Michael smiled, kissing her forehead. "Your father knew what he was doing, didn't he? He taught me that revenge isn't about destroying those who hurt you. It's about building a life so extraordinary that they realize exactly what they lost by underestimating you." Marcus Davis had raised a daughter who didn't need to prove her worth to anyone because she knew exactly who she was. And perhaps that was the most valuable legacy of all. The best revenge against prejudice is not to lower those who judge you. It is to rise so high that they are too small to reach you. If this story of overcoming adversity touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories about people who turned injustice into fuel for success.